The Doomsday Cult, Children of God. The Doomsday Cult, better known as the Children of God, was founded in the United States during the 1960s by David Berg, also called Moses David. The group became notorious for its apocalyptic nature, religious extremism, and abusive practices. Berg claimed that the world was on the brink of destruction and that only the cult's followers could be saved and establish a new spiritual order. The cult emerged during a period of counterculture and alternative religious movements in the US, when young people were searching for purpose and meaning outside traditional structures. Berg presented himself as a prophet and God's messenger, centralizing absolute power over all aspects of members' lives. The group combined radical Christianity, mysticism, apocalypticism, and doctrines of predestination. Berg wrote dozens of newsletters and books, known as the Mo Letters, which detailed rules for behavior, sexuality, evangelism, and internal discipline. These Mo Letters were distributed among members to reinforce blind loyalty to the leader, justify extreme practices, and manipulate perceptions of the outside world as corrupt and dangerous. The cult's central message was that salvation depended on absolute obedience to Berg, active participation in cult activities, and acceptance of spiritual instructions. No matter how controversial, recruitment was aggressive and selective. Berg mainly attracted young professionals, students, countercultural individuals, and emotionally vulnerable people, promising spiritual enlightenment, life purpose, and a global community of faithful followers. Once inside, members were isolated from the outside world, encouraged to sever family ties and required to hand over possessions and resources to the cult. Psychological control was intense. Followers lived in constant fear of the apocalypse, reinforced the leader's authority, and were subjected to daily indoctrination, ensuring total dependence on the group. Daily life within the group consisted of collective routines, work on cult properties, study of the Mo Letters, prayer, meditation, and devotion rituals to Berg. There was a strict hierarchy and discipline, with punishments for questioning the leader or attempting to escape. Berg introduced highly controversial practices, including flirty fishing, where members used sexuality to recruit new followers and raise funds, as well as sexual exploitation of minors, claiming these practices were divine mandates. Children were educated and integrated into sexual and evangelistic activities, creating an environment of systematic abuse and psychological manipulation. The Children of God expanded rapidly in the 1970s, establishing communities in Latin America, Europe, Asia, and Africa, adapting recruitment and indoctrination practices to local contexts. The cult maintained constant mobility, moving members between countries to avoid investigations, which made reporting sexual abuse, child exploitation, and financial crimes difficult. The sect operated as a global network, with communication centralized in the Mo Letters and total obedience to Berg, who coordinated finances, community expansion, and evangelistic activities. The cult gained international notoriety due to abusive sexual practices and child exploitation, reported in several countries. The flirty fishing strategy was used to manipulate outsiders, securing financial resources and new recruits. Children were frequently sexualized within the group, trained from an early age to obey the leader and accept abusive instructions as spiritual acts. Emotional manipulation, isolation, and continuous indoctrination created extreme dependence, turning members into instruments of the cult. After David Berg's death in 1994, the Children of God began to lose cohesion. Secondary leaders assumed control, but could not replicate the same absolute control, and extreme sexual practices were officially abandoned. The group later changed its name to the Family International, maintaining some religious doctrines, but publicly distancing itself from the most abusive activities. Nevertheless, the history of exploitation, manipulation, and fanaticism left deep scars on thousands of former members, many of whom suffered physical, emotional, and psychological trauma. The historical legacy of the Children of God is marked by apocalyptic fanaticism, psychological control, child abuse, and sexual exploitation, serving as an extreme example of how charismatic leaders can manipulate followers and justify illegal practices in the name of religion. The case is studied in cult psychology, criminology, international law, and child protection, serving as a global reference on the risks of apocalyptic groups, social isolation, and blind obedience to leaders. The history of the Children of God demonstrates how a combination of spiritual appeal, isolation, emotional manipulation, and absolute charisma can cause devastating harm to individuals, families, and entire communities. The group also shows that apocalyptic cults do not rely solely on poverty or ignorance. Many followers were educated professionals, students, and middle-class individuals, showing that emotional vulnerability and a search for purpose can be exploited by charismatic leaders. Today, the Children of God, the Family International, serves as a reference study for preventing abuse in religious organizations, monitoring radical groups, and protecting vulnerable minors and adults, reinforcing the importance of public policy, education, and ongoing investigation of abusive cults. The Children of God remains one of the most well-known apocalyptic cults of the 20th century, exemplifying the extreme consequences of religious fanaticism and psychological manipulation. Its founder, David Berg, is remembered as a clear example of a charismatic leader who used religion to gain absolute control over the lives of thousands. The sect's history continues to serve as a worldwide reference in studies of apocalypticism, abuse of power, and radical cult dynamics, with lasting impact on legislation, psychology, and victim protection policies.